Today on Why I Kept It, we are getting rid of games. We've come to the end of a 50-episode season, and I made a promise that when we did do that, I'd do Why I Culled It, and talk about games that have gotten into my collection, but I no longer want to own. We're at max shelf capacity here. It's one game in, one game out. So we're going to go through about 15 games that have been kicked off the shelf here, and have been languishing in the trade pile, and I am desperate to get rid of. How did I come about owning these, and why do I no longer want to own them? The first one is Brave Rats, which I picked up on Amazon clearance. It's got a weird theme, rat clans versus each other. It's in a tin, and if you're not already on the shelf, these are the extent of tins that I own. You're probably not getting onto the shelf. But it's a micro game by Seiji Kanai. He's the love letter guy, so hey, how could I go wrong? Another cool little micro game. Well, it's basically war. It's war meets love letter for two players, and that's really not going to work here. The other fun thing I like to show when I open this up is that it comes with like a rules reference, all the different possible interactions and results, complete with 3 separate footnotes. So if you're a new gamer who is intimidated by modern games, Brave Rats is not really going to do you any favors. You'll probably get glassy-eyed looking at that chart the moment you open it. Now the next game is Fight for Olympus. This is a game I really wanted to like because I have a soft spot for the whole Lookout 2-player line and, imported by Mayfair here. A couple knocks against it. One is that there's no insert at all, so this box is a complete disaster, and this will probably be damaged beyond tradability by the time I get rid of it. But the other is that it's just a bit of a slog. The game, it's just not fun. It's a one-on-one, 2-player game, and it's always the sense that the person who is losing in this game is doing so because the other player is just constricting their ability to actually play the game. You're going to reduce their hand size, reduce the draw, the turnover, and their card variety, and just prevent them from being able to have any fun. And once they've had so little fun that they die, then you become the victor in Fight for Olympus. So unfortunately, that's a relatively recent game I bought at a local game shop that opened up. I really wanted to support the shop. I heard some buzz about it. I think I actually got myself confused with Oracle of Delphi, the whole Greek mythology stuff, and walked away with a bit of a dud game. Next couple of games I'll go through are review copies that Gamewright had sent me years ago for MTV and Wired that I'm just kind of realizing aren't going to stick with the shelf here. The first is Scallywags, which is a lot of just play a card, does what it says. And it is kind of neat. There's a little bit more to it than that, but it shows 8 and up here because there's a bit of reading you have to do on the cards. Now that I have a 5-year-old going on 6 years old, I realize that by the time she's able to read and digest the information on the cards, we're probably going to mechanically be past what Scallywags has to offer. So I was holding on to it, but it's just not going to be a fit. The other is Take It or Leave It, which, to be honest, there's a joke here I could make. Not going to do it. Promised myself I wouldn't. So I'm considering even keeping Take It or Leave It at this point because I went through and looked at these games before I did the video, and I realized inside Take It or Leave It exists a full-size dice tray. Chuck dice into this at your table. I've actually been thinking about buying one of these for 15 or 20 bucks for X-Wing play. And while this is not as nice as the wooden one you would get for that kind of money, I don't know. Take It or Leave It isn't the worst dice game in the world. It's actually got an interesting hook when I describe it. You're basically playing Yahtzee, but you're doing it with secret orders. And you roll all 18 dice into that tray, and one at a time, you go around the table drafting the already rolled dice to try to fulfill your orders. But since your orders are secret, you're kind of pushing your luck. Can I get all the dice to fulfill an order? If I don't, dice are negative points. So it's interesting, but, I reviewed this 7 years ago, and it never got back to the table after that. So probably not going to keep it. If I do, because this has had no trade interest whatsoever, I'll probably just steal the dice tray, maybe throw the dice in a bits box, and just throw out the actual packaging and cards that go with it. The last of the bigger box Gamewright games is Knock Your Blocks Off, which is kind of 2 games in one. There's a real-time die rolling, then there's a flicking game. These both sound like fun things to me. I'll just sum this one up by saying the combination doesn't really work. we got a bigger box strategy game here in Space Cadets, which I was eager to own because I was a playtester on it. And I really like the whole everyone has their individual job within this game. It's a pure co-op game, which is usually a knock for me. There's only a handful of select co-ops like Pandemic and the Grizzled and the like that really make co-op gaming work for me. I felt this one could get over that hump. It hasn't really gotten to the table as much as I thought it would, and I feel like it's been kind of replaced by games that are team versus team. Space Cadets replaced itself with Space Cadets Dice Duel. Then Captain Sonar came along, also did that same formula very, very well. The good thematic, like dry erase board submarine battles. Space Cadets also gets kind of a knock for being hard to teach. If you're not very good at teaching games, you can kind of put your audience to sleep having to explain all the different unique roles. It's like teaching each person how to play a separate game. The other people just kind of doze off while you're doing that. So unfortunately, because co-ops aren't really my thing, although I did like Space Cadets, it's going out. I came about this originally because around the time Space Cadets was coming out was when I was extracting myself from being a paid reviewer. And so all of the copies I had accrued, I was trading like aggressively, trying to bring down the size of my collection. I was doing 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 trades of games that were not very good for relatively new hotness at the time. So Space Cadets was the perfect time for that, and I got a copy pretty much right when it came out, but it's barely seen any action since then. The last of the Game Right games, going back to this actually, is Joe Name It, which I'd say is more of an activity. It's a trivia game, and you roll a die, and that tells you how many answers you have to give to a sort of broad brush question, like, name a band with X many members, or name X number of sports that you don't use a ball when you play it. This is about as enjoyable as a daily calendar where you pull the pages off and read trivia questions, which isn't entirely a knock. I mean, this landed on our nightstand. You go to sleep at night and you read a book, or maybe you read each other some trivia questions and eventually fall asleep 20 questions later. So, my wife and I got through most of this box, so there's really no reason to keep it this many years later. Moving over into a different category here, I have 2 games that came in date boxes. Now, we signed up for a date box around the height of subscription box hysteria, and there really must have been a board gamer at the helm here, because almost every month had a board game in it. I mean, one month there was Morels, which is a fantastic 2-player game. I just already happened to own it. But the other months we got these 2 duds. One is Zoom Cubes, which you roll dice and try to do words or grids of words. It's very much bananagrams, except that it's a game that tortures you a bit because the luck of the die is involved, and you just might not get a very good slate of letters. So why do that to yourself? The other is Tumble, which also sounds like a game that will be up my alley because I love stacking games. It does something neat where if you're stacking here, you can put these blocker, half discs on here, and that forces your opponent to play in a more precarious position. But I got kind of bored with the whole every piece is just a rectangle thing. I love games like Bandu and Junk Art where the pieces are so weird and abstract that you get these crazy structures. How did you even get a piece there? You can get some of that with Tumble. It's not a horrible game, but I only need so many stacking games, and Tumble isn't going to make the cut there. Moving on to more games that I got because they were really cheap, and I took a flyer on them. These are $2 Barnes & Noble clearance pickups. That famous last day where Barnes & Noble is going to throw all their stuff in the dumpster, or they'll give it to you for $2. Led me to Die Monsters, which has some really cute monster art. They show some of the other ones on the back here. And it's the same designer and artist as Machikuro, but it's even simpler than Machikuro. You have cards numbered 1 through 5. Everyone has that same hand. You just pick a card and play it. There are many other games that do this. This one just happens to add a tiny little bit of extra complexity to it. There's a few extra rules as far as symbols printed on cards and collecting gems. I have many other games just like this as well. I would probably prefer to use Get Bit, which is just bare metal, just play the number, shark eats the little people type game. It's got a cool look to it, and it's such a simple game. I don't think it needs to be overcomplicated with die monsters. Another game and another. These are both $2 Barnes & Noble pickups, and these are games that I've never played. And I took them because they were super cheap, sitting on that sad little clearance shelf there. I read the rules to them and said, you know what? These aren't for my type of group. I'm never going to get these to the table. Days of Steam is worker placement tile. I stand corrected. Tile placement, not worker placement. Pick up and deliver game. But I'm kind of a creature of habit. I have a certain slate of tile placement games I really like. I also have certain train games I really like. And as evidenced by that, Days of Steam never got to the table. Armadura is a dudes on the map area control type game that comes in this tight little package. But if I'm playing that type of game, typically not the same situation where I need a tiny box portable game. It's usually with a very specific group of people, and we've got the day, we've got the house, we're going to play the maximized version of a dudes on a map type game. I don't need a little portable one, so just never got to the table. Don't feel the need to keep owning it. Next up is Prolix, which I got on Tanga, and this is actually a good word game. But funny enough, Gilhova has released a new version called Wordsy, which was Kickstarted last year. The game itself, I don't think is out yet. And I did go in on that Kickstarter, so I haven't gotten that yet. But when I do, I'm getting rid of Prolix, so I've already put it out in the trade pile. It's a game that I enjoyed. Didn't get to the table as often as I'd like, but I'm confident that the new and improved version with better graphic design and a little bit of gameplay tweak here is a game that I'm going to want to own in my collection, because there's a certain number of word games I can probably carry on these shelves, and Wordsy will fit, and it certainly replaces Prolix for me. Last game I've got sitting here is Campaign Manager 2008, which is one I did do an episode on. I hadn't played it at the time. It was like the reveal of shame. But I did get it to the table twice in the run-up to the election, and the game just didn't light off any fireworks at the table. I'm trying to remember specifically what I did or didn't like about this game, and honestly, I'm just drawing a blank. It's pretty bland, all things considered. And following this election, I probably never want to hear about presidential elections ever again in any form. So I'm certainly not going to play a board game about recent history. I just don't want to think about this stuff anymore. So Campaign Manager 2008, sadly, is going back to the trade bin. That was a Tanga pickup for the $7 price range. It's kind of hard to trade away because I split the corner while I was moving houses a couple of years ago. Luckily, I finally did get to play it, but didn't like it enough to keep it. The only other game I think that's been in the trade pile, it's actually gone out the door. There was a couple trades here. One, I got a random offer on BGG for Star Wars Risk, which was another cheap Amazon clearance deal. I wanted to try Star Wars Risk because it had a lot of hype, being a re-implementation of Star Wars The Queen's Gambit, which was an episode 1, unfortunately, themed game that had some interesting things going on with the Risk formula. They kind of took inspiration from that game and made a new Star Wars Risk last year. Picked it up for really cheap because it's a mass market Hasbro game. Thought it was kind of neat, but not great. And I got an offer for Lachita for Star Wars Risk. Lachita is a great classic hero, so absolutely I'm going to take it. And much to my surprise, Lachita came. It was a new printing in shrink. So I'm pretty happy with that deal. I almost felt kind of bad. Then I did get a message from the guy saying, hey, I received the copy of Risk. Super happy. Thanks so much for shipping quickly. So certainly the person knew what they were doing. And we were both very happy. One man's trash is another man's treasure in both regards. I also participated in a math trade for the first time ever. And in that case, I wound up giving away 2 games that were both pretty small. I put a lot out in this math trade. Everything you see here, plus Zularedo, the dice game, which just was not a good dice game. And I believe I had a second copy of Trombone, another Lookout Games 2-player collection, which was on an Amazon wish list. And apparently someone who was doing Christmas shopping doesn't understand the concept of wish lists and bought it for me but didn't remove it. And then of all the things on that large wish list, someone else purchase that. So I got 2 copies of Trombone. The only 2 games I got at this past Christmas time was 2 copies of the same game. But one of them did get out in a trade. This math trade got me Camel Up cards, which is fantastic. It's better than regular Camel Up. And it also got me Hanamikoji, which is a really neat 2-player, sort of like Battle Line inspired card game that came out late last year. So I was very happy with that math trade. A duplicate game and a somewhat poor dice game in Zularetto the Dice Game. They were both small games that were inexpensive to ship. Got me 2 really neat games back in return. So I'll probably do the math trade again. If I don't wind up throwing out some of these games, you may see them in a math trade soon. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you around. I'll be back in 6 months with another selection of why I kept these things. All right. Have fun.